Truck driver spots freezing child on dark highway. Then something beautiful happens that changes everything. Joe McKinnon had driven enough midnight routes to know every pothole, every curve, and every shadow along Highway 43. 32 years behind the wheel had taught him that the darkest hours, between 2 a.m. and dawn, were when the road showed its true character. Some nights, it felt like a living thing, breathing fog and whispering stories through the wind across his Peterbilt's broad hood. This particular November night was bitter cold, the kind that made his arthritis flare up and had him thinking about retirement more than usual. His thermos of coffee, lovingly prepared by his wife Mary before he'd left, was already half empty. The radio crackled with occasional chatter from other truckers, their voices familiar companions in the darkness. "Big Joe, you copy? This is Roadrunner, heading southbound past marker 156. The voice belonged to Tommy Chun, a younger driver Joe had mentored years ago. "Copy that, Roadrunner. All clear up here at 187. Watch out for ice patches near the Millers Creek Bridge." Joe smiled, remembering when he'd first started out, how the older drivers had looked after him. Now, at 58, he was the old guard, the one newer drivers turned to for advice about routes, weather, and life on the road. His thoughts drifted to Mary, probably asleep now in their modest ranch house on the outskirts of town. They'd raised 3 daughters there, Sarah, Rachel, and Katie, all grown now with families of their own. The youngest, Katie, had just made them grandparents for the first time. The photo of baby James was taped to his dashboard, next to the small cross Mary had given him on their first anniversary. The heater hummed steadily, fighting against the November chill. His load tonight was routine industrial parts heading to the manufacturing plant in Cedar Rapids. He'd been making this run twice a week for the past 5 years, ever since Midwest Transport had taken over the contract. Beverly's voice crackled over the CB. "Base to Big Joe, you passing the old Wilson farm yet?" "About 2 miles out, Bev. All quiet tonight." Beverly Russell had been working dispatch for almost as long as Joe had been driving. She was the heart of their operation, keeping track of dozens of drivers across 6 states, always ready with a kind word or a stern warning about approaching weather. The clock on his dashboard read 2:17 a.m. when his headlights caught something that made his heart skip a beat. At first, he thought it might be a deer. They were common along this stretch, but as he drew closer, the shape resolved itself into something that made his blood run cold. A child. A small figure in what looked like pajamas, walking along the shoulder of the highway. "Dear Lord in heaven," he muttered, carefully engaging his hazard lights. His mind raced through possibilities. A sleepwalker, a runaway, something worse? In all his years on the road, he'd never encountered anything quite like this. Joe's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as he began the careful process of slowing his rig. 32 years of experience kicked in automatically: hazard lights, gentle brake pressure, constant mirror checks. Even as his professional instincts took over, his father's heart was racing. "Base to Big Joe, everything okay out there?" Beverly's voice crackled through the CB, probably noticing his reduced speed on the GPS tracking. "Stand by, Bev," he responded, throat tight. "Might have a situation here." The girl couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Her pink pajamas had cartoon characters on them, those popular frozen princesses his granddaughter loved. The thin jacket she wore made his chest ache. It was barely enough for a fall day, let alone a bitter November night. But it was her feet that really got him, just socks, no shoes, probably soaked through from the damp shoulder of the road. Memory flashed unbidden. Katie at that age, climbing into his lap after a nightmare, seeking comfort. She'd worn similar pajamas, he remembered. The thought of his own daughter out here in the cold made his decision for him. Still, caution warred with compassion. The world wasn't as simple as it had been when he'd started driving in '91. He'd heard stories of highway scams, of truckers being set up by seemingly innocent situations. He reached for his phone, thinking to call 911 first, but then he saw her stumble in his side mirror. "Base, Big Joe here. I'm pulling over at marker 187. Got a child on the shoulder." Repeat, a child. Beverly's response was immediate, her voice shifting from casual to professional. Copy that, Big Joe. Want me to call it in? Stand by. Let me assess. But be ready. He carefully maneuvered his truck onto the shoulder, making sure to keep a safe distance ahead of the girl. The cab's air brakes hissed in the night air as he set them. Grabbing his heavy spare jacket, the thick one Mary insisted he keep even in summer, he prepared to step out into the cold. The temperature gauge on his dashboard read 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind chill would make it feel even colder. How long had she been out here? Joe switched on his cab's external lights, illuminating more of the shoulder. It was important she could see him clearly, less frightening that way. He'd learned about approaching scared animals back on his father's farm. Slow movements, calm voice, no sudden gestures. Before opening his door, he did one more thing. Years of experience had taught him to document everything, so he activated his dash cam's save function, marking the last 30 minutes of footage. Then he clicked on his personal body cam. Another piece of safety gear Mary had insisted on after a close call with an angry motorist last year. I'm stepping out now, Bev, he reported. Stand by. The wind hit him like a physical force as he opened his door. Decades of climbing in and out of truck cabs had left his knees creaky, but he managed the descent smoothly enough. The girl had stopped walking, standing still in the pool of his truck's lights. The wind whipped Joe's heavy jacket around him as he stood in the glow of his truck's lights. Years of loading docks and truck stops had taught him how to plant his feet firmly against strong gusts. But this wind seemed particularly cruel, especially considering the small figure shivering before him. Honey? He called out, keeping his voice gentle but loud enough to carry over the wind. Are you all right? I'm a truck driver, and I want to help. The girl's shivering was visible even from this distance. Her dark hair whipped around her face, and she hugged herself tightly, making herself even smaller. Joe's heart clenched at the sight of her bare feet shifting on the cold asphalt. My name's Joe McKinnon, he continued, staying where he was. I drive for Midwest Transport. That's my truck right there with the big blue letters. Been driving these roads longer than you've been alive, I reckon. He noticed how she glanced between him and the truck, then back over her shoulder, as if checking her escape routes. Smart girl, he thought, cautious, but that caution wouldn't keep her warm. I'm sea cold, she finally stammered, her teeth chattering audibly. Joe held up his spare jacket. Would you like this? It's extra warm, my wife Mary made sure of that. You can put it on right there where you are. I won't come any closer unless you say it's okay. The mention of his wife seemed to ease something in the girl's posture. Joe had learned over the years that mentioning Mary often helped in tense situations. Something about a married man with a wife made him seem safer, more trustworthy. He slowly placed the jacket on the ground and backed away. The girl darted forward, reminding him of the scared cats Mary sometimes rescued. Quick, nervous movements followed by stillness. The jacket swallowed her small frame, dragging on the ground, but at least it would keep her warm. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the wind. You're welcome, sweetheart. Listen, I've got my dispatch office just up ahead about a mile. There's a nice lady named Beverly there. She makes the best hot chocolate you've ever tasted. Would you like to go there and get warm? The girl's face crumpled slightly at the suggestion. Are you going to call someone? Well, Joe said carefully, I think we probably should. There are people who'd want to know you're safe. Your parents must be worried sick. The change in her expression was immediate and heartbreaking. Fear flashed across her features, and she took a small step backward. Please don't call my stepdad, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Please. Those 4 words told Joe more than 1,000 could have. He'd heard that tone before from his wife's work at the advocacy center, from the stories she brought home that sometimes kept them both awake at night. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Listen, honey, I've got 3 daughters of my own, he said, crouching down to be at her eye level while maintaining his distance. Whatever's wrong, whatever's happened, there are good people who can help. But first, we need to get you somewhere warm and safe. Can you trust me that far? She studied him for a long moment, clutching his jacket around her. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small but determined. "You promise you won't make me go back?" "I promise you won't go anywhere that isn't safe," Joe said firmly. "That's a trucker's word of honor, and we don't break those." "Base, this is Big Joe." He spoke into his radio, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I've got a young passenger incoming. Need you to prepare the break room. Over." Beverly's response was immediate. "Copy that, Big Joe. I'll have hot chocolate ready. Should I alert authorities?" Joe glanced at the girl, who was watching him with wary eyes. "Stand by on that, Bev. We'll assess when we arrive." Getting the girl into his truck proved to be its own challenge. She hesitated at the passenger door, staring up at the high step like it was a mountain to climb. Her sock-covered feet were soaked through, and Joe noticed she was favoring her left ankle. "Here's what we'll do," he said, keeping his voice casual. "I'm going to turn around and face the other way, and you can use the steps however you need to. Take your time." He heard the door creak open, followed by the sounds of careful climbing. When he turned back, she was settled in the passenger seat, his jacket wrapped tightly around her like armor. The cab's interior light revealed more details he wished he hadn't seen. A fading bruise near her temple, partially hidden by her hair. "Seatbelt first," he reminded her gently, fighting to keep his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "Safety first, that's the trucker's way." As they pulled back onto the highway, Joe kept the heat running full blast. The girl, who still hadn't told him her name, had stopped shivering quite so violently, but her feet were concerning him. They needed to be checked for frostbite. "Mind if I ask how long you were walking?" he ventured, keeping his eyes on the road. I'm not sure," she mumbled. "It was dark when I left, after Mom went to work." "And where did you start from?" "Pine Grove Trailer Park." Joe's hands tightened on the wheel. Pine Grove was a good 8 miles back. This child had walked 8 miles in the freezing cold, in nothing but pajamas and socks. "That's quite a journey," he said carefully. "Must have been something pretty important to make you walk that far." She didn't respond immediately, but he could see her reflection in the passenger window, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. He said, "She started, then stopped, swallowing hard. My stepdad said next time he'd... She couldn't finish the sentence, but her hand unconsciously went to her bruised temple. Joe took a deep breath, trying to control the rage that threatened to overwhelm him. In that moment, he wasn't just a truck driver anymore. He was every father who'd ever wanted to protect a child from harm. "Emma," she whispered suddenly. "My name is Emma." "Well, Emma," Joe said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to know something. You're safe now. Whatever happens next, you're not going back to that man. I promise you that." The dispatch office's lights came into view, a beacon in the darkness. As Joe pulled into the lot, he could see Beverly's silhouette in the window, already waiting with a blanket in her hands. "Ready to go inside?" he asked Emma. "Beverly's got that hot chocolate waiting, and we can take care of those cold feet." Emma nodded, but then reached out and grabbed his sleeve. "Mr. Joe, thank you for stopping. I wasn't sure anyone would." The dispatch office was a modest building, but tonight it felt like a fortress of safety. Beverly Russell stood in the doorway, her usual no-nonsense demeanor softened by concern. She'd already transformed the break room, Joe noticed. The harsh fluorescent lights were off, replaced by the warmer glow of desk lamps. The ancient couch had been covered with clean blankets, and the small space heater hummed steadily. Land's sakes, Beverly breathed when she saw Emma's condition. In the better light, the girl's state was even more alarming. Her dark hair was tangled with ice crystals, her socks were torn, and her feet had taken on a worrying bluish tinge. "I've got a first aid kit and some spare socks in my locker," Beverly said, her voice carefully controlled. "Let's get you warmed up, honey." Emma stayed close to Joe as they entered, her small hand clutching the edge of his jacket. The transformation from the frightened child on the highway to one seeking protection from him made his throat tight with emotion. "First things first," Beverly announced, setting a steaming mug of hot chocolate on the break room table. "Warm drinks, dry socks, and then we'll talk about what needs to happen next." Joe watched as Beverly handled the situation with practiced grace. She helped Emma out of her wet socks, checking her feet with gentle efficiency. "No frostbite, thank the Lord," she muttered. "But we'll need to warm these up gradually." While Beverly tended to Emma, Joe stepped into the dispatch office to make two crucial calls. The first was to Mary. His wife needed to know what was happening, and her experience at the advocacy center would be invaluable. The second would be to the authorities, but he wanted to do it right. "Joe?" Mary's voice was sleepy but alert. "What's wrong?" He explained the situation in low tones, watching through the office window as Beverly wrapped Emma's feet in warm blankets. When he described the bruises and Emma's fearful reaction to mentioning her stepfather, Mary's breath caught. "I'm coming in," she said firmly. "Don't call the police yet. Let me handle it. We need to do this carefully to protect Emma. Children in these situations need to tell their stories once, to the right people at the right time." Back in the break room, Emma was beginning to warm up, both physically and emotionally. Beverly had found an old comb in her purse and was gently working the ice from Emma's hair while the girl sipped her hot chocolate. "My mom," Emma said suddenly, looking up at Joe with worried eyes. "She works nights at the hospital. She doesn't know I left. She'll be scared when she gets home." "We'll find a way to let her know you're safe," Joe assured her. "Can you tell us her name?"
Lisa Connor.
"She's a nurse in the ER." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "She doesn't know what my stepdad does. I tried to hide it. He said if I told, he'd hurt her too." Joe and Beverly exchanged glances over Emma's head. The girl's protective instinct toward her mother spoke volumes about the burden she'd been carrying. "Emma," Beverly said gently, "you've been very brave, protecting your mom like that, but sometimes grown-ups need to know what's happening so they can help. Would it be okay if we talked about what Mark did?" Emma's hands tightened around the hot chocolate mug. "He gets mad sometimes, really mad. It used to be just yelling, but then..." She touched the bruise near her temple. "Tonight he said next time he'd teach me a real lesson. I was scared, so I waited until he fell asleep on the couch and I ran." The sound of a car pulling up outside made Emma tense, but Joe recognized the headlights. "That's just my wife Mary," he explained quickly. "She helps people who've been hurt. She's real good at making sure kids like you stay safe." Mary McKinnon entered the dispatch office like a warm breeze, her presence immediately filling the space with calm competence. Despite being roused from sleep, she looked completely professional in her heavy winter coat and practical shoes. She'd even grabbed her work bag. The one Joe knew contained everything from emergency clothing to legal forms. Emma watched Mary's approach with the wariness of a child who'd learned to be suspicious of adults. But something in Mary's gentle demeanor seemed to put her at ease. Maybe it was the way Mary sat down at Emma's eye level, or how she didn't immediately reach out or try to touch her. "Hi, Emma," Mary said softly. "I'm Mary, Joe's wife. I work at a place called the Children's Advocacy Center. Do you know what that is?" Emma shook her head, still clutching her now empty hot chocolate mug like a shield. "Well, it's a special place where kids can feel safe to tell their stories, and where we help make sure they stay safe." Mary's voice was warm but matter-of-fact. "Would you like to tell me about what happened tonight?" As Emma began to speak, Joe noticed how Mary subtly positioned her phone to record the conversation. Something he knew was standard procedure for cases like this. The girl's story came out in pieces, like a puzzle slowly being assembled. Mark's escalating anger, the hidden bruises, the threats that kept her silent. "He said nobody would believe me," Emma whispered. "That mom would be mad at me for making up stories." "We believe you, Emma," Mary assured her. "Every word. And your mom won't be mad. She'll be grateful you're safe." Beverly, who had been quietly monitoring the dispatch radio, suddenly straightened. "Joe, I've got Tommy Chun on the radio. He's passing Pine Grove Trailer Park and says there's some commotion. Looks like they've discovered Emma's missing. Mary's expression turned focused. We need to move quickly now. Emma, I'm gonna call some special police officers who work with kids like you. They'll help us make sure you and your mom stay safe. Is that okay? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Will you stay with me? Of course, sweetheart. I'll be right here. What happened next was a carefully choreographed dance of protection and procedure. Mary made several rapid phone calls to the Special Victims Unit, to the emergency room where Lisa Connor worked, to her colleagues at the Advocacy Center. Joe and Beverly provided coffee and support, watching in amazement as Mary transformed their humble dispatch office into a command center of sorts. Within an hour, 2 plainclothes detectives arrived, a woman named Martinez and her partner, Detective Chun. They were followed shortly by a social worker named Sarah, who brought fresh clothes and shoes in Emma's size. Your mom is on her way, Detective Martinez told Emma gently. The hospital is sending someone to cover her shift, and we have officers making sure your stepdad doesn't leave the trailer park. Emma's eyes widened. Is he going to be mad? He's not going to hurt you or your mom ever again, Martinez assured her. We're going to make sure of that. As if on cue, the sound of tires on gravel announced another arrival. Through the window, they could see a woman in hospital scrubs running toward the building, her face streaked with tears. That's my mom, Emma whispered, standing up uncertainly. Joe watched as mother and daughter were reunited, their tears mixing as they held each other tight. Lisa Connor's face showed a mixture of relief, love, and dawning horror as she began to understand what her daughter had been enduring. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky when the last police car pulled away from the dispatch office. Mark had been taken into custody without incident, passed out drunk. He'd barely registered the officer's presence until the handcuffs clicked shut. The trailer park neighbors, awakened by the commotion, had watched in silence as justice finally arrived at lot number 23. Lisa sat on the break room couch, Emma curled against her side like a small cat seeking warmth. The girl had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the night's events and wrapped in one of Mary's soft blankets. Her mother stroked her hair with trembling fingers, her other hand clutching a cup of Beverly's coffee. I should have known, Lisa whispered, more to herself than the others. All those excuses about falling, about being clumsy. I'm a nurse, for God's sake. I should have seen the signs. Mary sat beside her, her voice gentle but firm. Abusers are expert manipulators, Lisa. They isolate their victims, create elaborate covers for their actions. This isn't your fault. If Mr. Joe hadn't found her, Lisa's voice broke. Joe, who had been standing by the window watching the sunrise, turned back to the room. Emma found herself, he said quietly. She was brave enough to leave, to walk 8 miles in the cold rather than endure 1 more minute of abuse. That kind of courage, that comes from good parenting, from knowing deep down that she deserved better. Beverly, who had been monitoring the dispatch radio through the night while coordinating with other drivers to cover Joe's route, stepped into the break room. I've got the shelter on line 2, she announced. They've got a room ready whenever you're ready to go. The women's shelter was one of Mary's regular partners through her work at the Advocacy Center. They'd already prepared a secure apartment for Lisa and Emma, complete with new clothes, food, and everything they'd need for a fresh start. What about work? Lisa asked, worry creasing her forehead. The hospital is already aware of the situation, Mary assured her. They're putting you on paid leave under the Violence Against Women Act provisions. Your job will be waiting when you're ready to return. Joe watched as Mary continued to weave her web of support and protection around the small family. Over the years, he'd seen her do this dozens of times, turning crisis into opportunity, fear into hope. It was why they'd started keeping spare clothes in his truck, why Beverly had emergency numbers posted by every phone, why the dispatch office had become an unofficial safe haven for those in need. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Lisa bent to kiss her daughter's forehead, and Joe saw both love and determination in the mother's eyes. Whatever came next, these two would face it together. "The sun's coming up," Beverly observed, looking out the window. "New day's beginning." Joe nodded, thinking about how much had changed in just a few hours. One small girl's courage had set in motion a chain of events that would ripple out far beyond this night. He knew from experience that healing wouldn't be easy or quick, but it would come. In the weeks that followed, Joe often thought about that cold November night. The highway had never looked quite the same to him since then. Every time he passed mile marker 187, he remembered a small figure in frozen princess pajamas, walking bravely into the unknown. The case against Mark moved swiftly through the legal system. Emma's recorded statement, combined with photographic evidence of her injuries and medical records, left little room for doubt. When other victims from Mark's past came forward, the prosecutor's case became even stronger. Joe and Mary attended every court hearing, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. Emma would look for them each time, drawing strength from their presence. She'd grown stronger, Joe noticed, standing taller. The Advocacy Center's child therapist was helping her find her voice, teaching her that she deserved to be heard. 1 month after that fateful night, Beverly organized a special meeting at the dispatch office. Drivers from across the region gathered to learn about recognizing signs of abuse and trafficking. Mary led the training, but it was Emma's mother Lisa who captured everyone's attention with her story. "We tend to think of highways as just routes from point A to point B," Lisa told the assembled drivers. "But for my daughter, that highway became a path to freedom, and a truck driver became her guardian angel." Joe shifted uncomfortably at the praise, but Mary squeezed his hand under the table. The meeting led to something bigger, the formation of Nightlights, a network of truckers trained to recognize and respond to signs of abuse and trafficking. Beverly's dispatch office became the hub, coordinating with advocacy centers and safe houses across 6 states. Emma and Lisa moved into their own apartment after 2 months at the shelter. It was a small place, but filled with light and hope. Emma's new school understood her situation, providing extra support and counseling. She joined an art therapy group, where she painted pictures of big trucks under starry skies. The trucking community rallied around them in unexpected ways. Tommy Chen organized a furniture drive. Other drivers' wives provided home-cooked meals. Beverly knitted Emma a blue blanket with trucks embroidered on the border. The dispatch office's break room wall now featured one of Emma's paintings, a bright yellow sun rising over a highway. On a crisp spring morning, 6 months after that November night, Joe received a special delivery at the dispatch office. It was a handmade card, decorated with careful drawings of trucks and stars. Inside, in a child's improving handwriting, was a simple message. "Dear Mr. Joe, thank you for stopping that night. Mom and I are doing good now. I'm not scared anymore. My counselor says I'm brave, but I think you're the brave one. You saw someone who needed help and you stopped. Mom says that's what heroes do. Love, Emma. P.S. I got an A on my story about that night. My teacher says sometimes the scariest journeys lead us home." Joe had to remove his glasses to wipe his eyes after reading it. Beverly, who'd been pretending not to watch, finally spoke up. "You know, Joe, that night changed more than just Emma's life. Look at what's grown from it." She gestured to the dispatch office walls, now covered with Nightlights network information, safety protocols, and emergency numbers. A photo showed the latest graduating class of truckers from their awareness training program. Another showed Emma and her mother at a fundraiser for the Advocacy Center, both smiling broadly. As Joe settled into his regular route 1 year after that fateful November night, the CB radio crackled to life. "Base to Big Joe. Got a special visitor here waiting for you." He smiled, knowing exactly who it would be. It was November 15th, 1 year to the day since he'd spotted those pink pajamas on the highway shoulder. He'd been expecting this visit. When he pulled into the dispatch office parking lot, Emma was waiting with her mother. She looked so different now, healthy, confident, wearing a warm winter coat and proper boots. Her dark hair was neatly braided, and she carried a large gift bag decorated with truck stickers. "Mr. Joe," she called out, waving excitedly. "We brought you anniversary cake." Inside the dispatch office, Beverly had decorated the break room with streamers. Mary was there too, having taken the afternoon off from the advocacy center. The cake, Joe discovered, was decorated with a highway scene complete with a blue semi-truck. Emma designed it herself, Lisa explained proudly. She's quite the artist now. As they shared cake and hot chocolate, Beverly's special recipe, of course, Emma caught Joe up on all her news. She was doing well in school, had joined the art club, and even helped start a support group for other kids who'd been through tough times. And guess what? She announced, practically bouncing in her chair. I got picked to speak at the Night Lights conference next month. I'm going to tell my story to help train new drivers. Joe felt his throat tighten with emotion. The Night Lights network had grown beyond anything they'd imagined, with over 500 train drivers now covering routes across the Midwest. Emma's story had become a cornerstone of their training program, teaching drivers that sometimes the most important cargo wasn't in their trailers, but walking along the highway's edge. You know, Mary said, watching Emma chat animatedly with Beverly about the conference plans. Sometimes the best way to heal is to help others heal too. Lisa nodded, her eyes glistening. She's helped me heal too, made me stronger, braver. She touched the name badge on her scrub top. She'd recently been promoted to charge nurse in the ER and was known for her particular sensitivity to signs of domestic abuse. As the afternoon light began to fade, Emma pulled something from her backpack. It was a framed drawing much more sophisticated than her earlier works. It showed a starlit highway stretching into the distance, with a lone truck's headlights illuminating the darkness. But what caught Joe's eye was the small figure walking toward the light, and the simple words written beneath, "Sometimes angels drive trucks." "For your cab," Emma said softly, "so you'll always remember that stopping matters." Joe hugged her tight, remembering the frightened child from a year ago. "I could never forget, sweetheart. Some things change a person forever." As he watched Emma and her mother drive away later that evening, Joe thought about all the highways stretching across the country, and all the lost souls walking their edges. Thanks to one brave little girl, more lights were shining in the darkness now, more eyes watching, more hearts ready to stop and help.